My daughter-in-law handed me a glass of fresh juice, her smile calm, but her hands were shaking. The smell was strange, almost bitter, and something inside me whispered not to drink it. So I quietly switched my glass with her husband's when she wasn't looking. 5 minutes later, I heard screams coming from the kitchen. Before I tell you what happened next, if you're watching this, please hit subscribe to her voice. Tell me in the comments which part shocked you the most. When I heard those screams, I froze. The glass slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor, orange juice spilling like blood across the tiles. My heart stuttered in my chest. That sound, it wasn't just fear. It was something deeper, something that told me life as I knew it had just changed. I ran to the living room, my hands trembling. My son, David, was on the floor, gasping for air. His lips were turning pale, his fingers twitching helplessly. Beside him, my daughter-in-law, Emily, was kneeling, her voice sharp and shaky. "Oh my God, what's happening to him? Somebody help." She looked terrified, but not the way a wife looks when her husband's dying. No, her fear was different. It was the fear of getting caught. For a second, I couldn't move. I just stood there, staring at her, watching her pretend. My knees felt weak, my throat tight. Then David's voice broke through, faint and desperate. "Mom," and I snapped back to life. "Call 911. I screamed, fumbling for my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it again. The minutes that followed felt endless. Paramedics rushing in, questions flying, Emily crying louder, playing the role of the helpless wife. But even as they carried my son away, something in me whispered the truth. I knew she had done this. The ambulance lights flashed red and blue against our white walls. I stood there in the doorway, frozen. My reflection in the window didn't even look like me. My hands were still wet from the spilled juice, sticky, trembling. I looked down at the counter. 2 glasses, one half empty, one still untouched. The smell of it hit me again, sweet but strange. I picked up the glass she'd poured for me earlier, the one I didn't drink. It looked normal, but something about it didn't feel right. My heart pounded in my ears as I set it down carefully. I didn't know what to do yet, but I knew I needed to save it. Hours passed before the doctor came out. His eyes were serious, his voice low. "Mrs. Voice low. Mrs. Menz Thompson," he said, "your son was poisoned." The word hit me like a brick. Poisoned. I felt the floor tilt under me. My chest ached so hard, it hurt to breathe. Emily gasped, grabbing my arm as if she were shocked too. "Poisoned? Oh my God, who would do that?" she cried, but I could see through her. Her eyes gave her away too dry for real tears, too focused on the doctor's face, as if measuring his next words. But I wanted to scream at her, to grab her by the shoulders and ask why. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the years of being a mother, or maybe it was something deeper, the quiet strength that comes when pain hardens into resolve. I decided right then I wouldn't say a word. Not yet. That night, I drove home alone. The house felt different, cold. Every shadow looked heavier, every sound sharper. I walked into the kitchen, the smell of that juice still lingering like a ghost. But I stood there for a long time, staring at the counter. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I took that glass, poured what was left of the juice into a plastic bottle, sealed it, and hid it deep inside the freezer. It wasn't just evidence, it was the start of something. I sat down in the dark, the clock ticking softly behind me. I thought of every time Emily smiled at me, every sweet word she said, every fake kindness that now felt like a blade. My son had trusted her. I had trusted her, and she had poisoned that trust literally. Tears rolled down my cheeks, but they didn't feel weak. I abasked, one outer. They felt like fuel. Somewhere deep inside, something shifted. The soft, forgiving woman I used to be was gone. In her place was someone quieter, sharper, patient enough to wait for the perfect moment. I looked toward David's photo on the wall and whispered, "Don't worry, my boy. I'll make sure she never hurts anyone again." Outside, the night was silent, but inside me, a storm was rising. And this time, I wasn't going to run from it. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and sadness. Every peep, every low hum of the machines felt like a countdown to something I wasn't ready for. I walked slowly down the corridor, holding my purse tight against my chest, my steps echoing on the white tiles. When I reached David's room, I stopped at the door. He looked so still, so pale, his body hooked up to tubes and wires. My baby boy, the same boy who once used to run to me when he scraped his knee, now lying there, fighting for his life. Emily sat beside him, her hair perfectly brushed, her tears perfectly placed. She looked up and saw me. "He's stable now," she said softly, her voice breaking just enough to sound real. "The doctor said they're running tests." I nodded but didn't sit. I just stood there watching her. There was something cold about the way she spoke, like she was rehearsing her lines. My instinct screamed that she already knew what those tests would show. After a few minutes, she excused herself to get coffee. I waited until she was gone, then walked closer to David. I took his hand in mine. It felt cold but alive. "You're going to be okay," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Mama's here. I promise you I'll find out what happened." His eyes moved slightly like he heard me. That tiny flicker gave me strength I didn't know I had. I sat there for a while, just listening to the sound of the monitor. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. I opened it and my heart skipped a beat. It was a picture of Emily standing at a pharmacy counter, holding a small white bottle. The timestamp was from 2 days ago. There was no message, just that image. My fingers shook as I stared at it. Who sent this? Why? Before I could think, Emily walked back in, holding 2 cups. "I got you one too," she said sweetly, handing me coffee. I looked at it, then at her, and smiled faintly. "Thank you," I whispered, setting it down, untouched. We sat in silence. The only sound was the steady beep of David's heart monitor. I could feel her eyes on me, watching, measuring. She was trying to read me to see if I suspected. I didn't give her that satisfaction. I just kept my expression calm, almost tired. Let her think I was still the same gentle mother-in-law who baked her cookies and believed her lies. That night, I didn't go home. I stayed in the hospital waiting room pretending to doze off while doctors came and went. Around 2 a.m., I saw Emily again walking fast toward the exit, whispering into her phone. I followed quietly, just far enough to hear her say, "No, she doesn't know anything. The old woman's clueless." My stomach turned. She laughed softly, then added, "Yeah, the plan worked, but I didn't expect him to survive." I froze. My hands went cold. My heart stopped for a second. The plan worked. Didn't expect him to survive. That was all I needed to hear. I stepped back before she saw me and walked away quietly, my feet barely touching the floor. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in my car in the parking lot, staring at the steering wheel, letting the truth settle in like poison of its own. By morning, my path was clear. I went home, made a cup of coffee, and opened the freezer. That bottle of juice still sat there, frozen solid. I pulled it out, held it up to the light, and whispered, "You're my witness." I called an old friend, Detective Miller, who'd worked with my late husband on a few local cases years ago. I told him everything. He didn't believe me at first. "Helen, these things, they're delicate. You need solid proof." "I have it," I said quietly. I kept the drink she gave him, and I heard her confess. There was a long pause. Then he sighed. "Don't do anything rash. Bring it in. Let us test it." I agreed. But I didn't tell him when. I wanted to move on my terms. I'd spent too many years trusting people who didn't deserve it. This time, I'd control every step. That evening, I went back to the hospital. Emily was sitting beside David again, pretending to wipe away tears. She looked at me and said softly, "He's still the same. I don't know what I'd do without him." I stared at her for a moment and then said, "You should get some rest. Go home, take a shower. I'll stay here tonight." She hesitated, then nodded. She hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you, Mom." The word mom rolled off her tongue like poison itself. As soon as she left, I locked the door quietly and sat beside David. His hand twitched again. I leaned closer and whispered, "You're strong, my boy. I just hold on a little longer. I'm fixing this, I promise." I stayed there until morning, holding his hand, listening to the soft rhythm of his heartbeat. When the sun rose, I made my move. I drove straight to the lab Detective Miller recommended, handed over the sealed bottle, and signed the papers for testing. My stomach churned the whole time. The technician looked at me and said, "Results will take a few days." I nodded, trying to hide the tremor in my voice. "That's fine. Just please make sure they're accurate." Driving home, I felt something strange, calm, steady determination, the kind of calm that only comes after the worst storm. I knew I couldn't confront Emily until I had the report in my hand. So for now, I played my part. That evening, I cooked dinner again, pretending everything was normal. Emily chatted about meaningless things, her laughter echoing too loud. I smiled, nodded, responded when I had to. Inside, though, I was counting the days. When she reached for the salad, I noticed how her hand shook slightly. Fear. Maybe she sensed it that her time was running out. After dinner, I walked into the backyard, looked up at the stars, and whispered, "I'm coming for you, Emily. And when I do, it won't be with anger, it'll be with truth. Because the truth, I've learned, it can destroy a person far more quietly than revenge ever could." And mine was already on its way. 3 days passed, each one slower than the last. The house was quiet, almost too quiet, like it was holding its breath. Every morning, I woke up before sunrise, made my coffee, and sat by the window, staring at the road, waiting for a car that never came. My mind was restless, circling the same thought over and over. What if I was wrong? What if Emily didn't do it? But then I'd remember her voice that night in the parking lot, saying those words. I didn't expect him to survive. That memory alone kept the fire inside me alive. On the fourth morning, the phone finally rang. It was Detective Miller. His voice was steady but low. "Helen, I got the results back. Can you come by?" I didn't ask questions. I just grabbed my purse and left. The drive felt longer than usual, every red light stretching time like punishment. When I reached the station, Miller was standing near the window holding a folder. He turned when he saw me, and for a second, his face said everything. It was poison, he said quietly. Traces of cyanide, strong enough to kill within minutes. My knees almost gave out. I grabbed the chair beside me and sat down slowly. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear his next words. "It's a miracle your son's alive, Helen. The dose wasn't enough. Maybe she measured wrong. Maybe he didn't drink all of it, but there's no doubt it was deliberate." I looked up, meeting his eyes. "You're sure?" He nodded. "Positive. We're running background checks on Emily, but if you press charges now, we can." I stopped him. "No, not yet." He frowned. "Helen, she tried to kill your son." "I know," I said softly. "But if we move now, she'll twist it. She'll cry, she'll lie, she'll say I planted it. She's clever, and she has him wrapped around her finger. I need him to see it with his own eyes." Miller hesitated, then nodded slowly. "All right, but be careful." I smiled faintly. I always am. That night, I returned home to find Emily sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. When she saw me, she jumped up quickly. "How's David? Did you see him today?" I set my purse down. "He's improving," I said softly. "The doctors said he might wake up soon." Her smile faltered for just a second, but she covered it fast. "That's great," she whispered, her eyes darting away. I walked to the kitchen, pretending to tidy up. My mind was spinning. I knew I had to be patient. If I pushed too soon, she'd sense it. So I waited. The next morning, I went to the hospital again. When I walked into the room, David's eyes were open, just barely, but open. Tears filled my eyes instantly. "Oh, sweetheart," I whispered, touching his hand. "You're back." He blinked slowly, his lips trembling as he tried to speak. "Mom." "Shh," I said softly. "Don't talk. Just rest." But his eyes shifted, searching the room. "Emily," he whispered. "She'll be here soon." I lied gently, though the thought of her being near him made my skin crawl. A few hours later, she arrived wearing a bright blue dress, makeup perfectly done. She rushed to his side, crying as if she'd been waiting for this moment her whole life. "Oh my God, baby, you scared me." He squeezed her hand weakly, and I watched her lean close, whispering something I couldn't hear. I stepped back, staying silent. I didn't want to ruin the moment, but I also didn't want to let it fool me. The next few days were a blur. David started recovering faster than anyone expected. Emily stayed glued to his side, feeding him soup, fixing his pillows, pretending to be the perfect wife. But I could see the cracks forming, the tension in her jaw when I entered the room. She knew I was onto her. One evening after they returned home, I saw her sneaking out to the backyard, talking on her phone. I stayed inside, lights off, watching from the window. Her tone was sharp, panicked. "No, I can't move the money yet. He's watching everything. Just give me time." I recorded it quietly on my phone, every word, every pause. When she hung up, she stood still for a moment, staring into the dark, then went back inside like nothing happened. Later that night, I found her phone left on the counter while she was in the shower. My hands trembled as I opened it, scrolling through her messages. There it was, a thread with someone named Tyler, messages about insurance, timing, and transfer. My stomach twisted. It was all there. She wasn't just trying to kill my son. She was trying to erase him, to take everything he had. I copied everything onto my own phone, then quietly put hers back exactly where I found it. When she came out of the shower, she smiled at me, that same empty, polished smile. "Good night, Mom," she said sweetly. "Good night, dear," I replied softly. The next morning, I met Detective Miller again. I showed him the recording, the messages, the photos. His eyes widened. "This is more than enough," he said. "We can arrest her." But I shook my head again. "Not yet. Let me finish this my way." "Ellen, what are you planning?" "Justice," I said quietly, "not just for David, but for every woman who's ever been lied to, used, or underestimated." That evening, I cooked dinner for all three of us. I set the table like old times, candles, soft music, David's favorite meal. Emily smiled, trying to look comfortable. She didn't know what was coming. After dinner, I handed David an envelope. "These are your medical reports," I said, "from the hospital. I thought you should see them." He opened it slowly. His face changed as he read the words. "Cyanide traces detected in bloodstream." His hands shook. Mom, what is this?" Emily's fork clattered onto the plate. "What are you saying?" she cried. "You think I..." But David turned to her, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Emily, you made that juice," she stammered, tears welling up. "No, I don't know how." I stood there silently, letting the truth hang between us. For once, I didn't need to say anything. The truth was louder than any scream, sharper than any revenge. Emily ran upstairs, crying, shouting that it wasn't her fault. David followed her, confused and broken. I stayed downstairs, breathing slowly, calmly. I had done my part. The storm had finally begun, and I wasn't afraid of it anymore. That kind of silence. The next morning, the house felt heavier than ever, as if it had absorbed all the tension from the night before. I moved through it quietly, making breakfast for David as if nothing had changed, but my mind was racing. Every move Emily made, every glance she threw my way was filled with fear now, and it thrilled me quietly. I could see her calculating, wondering how much I knew, what I had discovered. I poured David his coffee, watching his hands tremble slightly as he lifted the cup. He was still weak, still fragile, and I realized just how close she had come to ending him. My stomach turned with anger, but I kept it hidden, hiding behind a calm exterior that fooled everyone but me. By mid-morning, Emily was hovering in the kitchen again, her voice soft, her tone careful. Do you need help with anything, Mom? She asked, the words dripping with sweetness I no longer trusted. I smiled faintly, pouring eggs into a pan, letting the sizzle fill the room. No, dear, I said slowly. I've got it. But inside, I was plotting, thinking of every quiet, clever way I could reclaim what she had tried to destroy. That afternoon, David wanted to rest, so I sent him to his room and told Emily she could check on him if she liked. I watched her retreat, her hips tight, her shoulders stiff. I followed silently a few steps behind, pretending to look at the cupboards, but listening. That's when I heard her phone buzz. She picked it up quickly, whispering, "Yes, I know." Soon, my heart beat faster, but I stayed calm, moving a chair just slightly so that when she hung up and left it on the counter, I could see the screen. There it was again, a message from Tyler about timing, about insurance, about taking control. My pulse raced with both fear and a dark thrill. The proof was undeniable. I left it there, making a mental note to save everything. Emily didn't notice. Later that evening, I made David's favorite dessert, a small chocolate cake, the smell drifting through the kitchen. Emily peeked in, smiling nervously. "I can help, Mom," she said, her words hesitant, her eyes flicking toward me as if trying to read my mind. I let her stand there, pretending to be kind as I carefully placed a small note in David's pocket. It was just a reminder of the truth. Nothing more, nothing less. Over the next few days, I kept my distance, letting her think she was winning back my son's trust, all the while gathering every shred of evidence, every small slip she made, every quiver in her voice. I made no sudden moves, no accusations, no anger. That was her mistake. She expected fireworks, confrontation, chaos. Instead, I offered calm, patience, quiet observation. One evening, as I was arranging flowers in the living room, I overheard her in David's office. Her voice was panicked. "No, I didn't think she'd find out this soon. We have to cover it. I can't lose him, not now." My lips curved into a small smile. She had no idea how carefully I had been watching, how meticulously I had collected proof. That night, I sat by the fireplace going over every message, every recording, every photograph. I made a plan, slow, deliberate, unstoppable. Emily thought she was clever. She thought I was naive, but I had learned the art of silence, the power of waiting, the satisfaction of letting the storm arrive exactly when it was ready. The next morning, I called Detective Miller again. I handed him the folder I had compiled over the past week. "It's all here," I said softly. "Everything she's done." He flipped through it, his eyes widening, his fingers tracing the lines of evidence. "Helen, this is more than enough. She won't know what hit her." I nodded, calm, my heart steady, my mind clear. "Good," I whispered. Later that day, I saw Emily pacing in the kitchen, her hands twisting in front of her, her expression tight. I let her stew for a moment, then called David in. I handed him the phone with one of her recorded conversations. He listened, his eyes growing wide, his mouth opening slightly, shock and disbelief washing over his face. "Mom, he started, but I shook my head gently. I let her explain herself, I said softly. Or better, let the truth speak for itself. Emily froze, her face pale, realizing the tables had turned. The power in the room shifted. She'd been the predator, and now, quietly, I was in control. David looked at me, gratitude and awe mixed in his eyes. "How did you?" he whispered, but I only smiled. "Patience, my dear. Patience is the strongest weapon of all." Over the next days, Emily tried everything. Tears, excuses, laughter, even fake apologies. None of it worked. I remained calm, serene, untouchable. Every move she made, every glance I anticipated. Slowly, meticulously, I prepared the final step, the legal action that would ensure she could never harm my family again. She thought she controlled the household, that she had spun her web perfectly. She didn't realize that I had been building my net quietly, silently over weeks. When the day came, I handed David the documents. "Everything is in your name now," I said softly. His eyes widened. "Mom, how?" I smiled gently, my heart full. I did what needed to be done. Emily's eyes went wide as she realized her world was collapsing. The calm in my voice, the quiet certainty in my movements, it terrified her more than any shouting ever could. She had tried to poison my son, to control everything, to lie and manipulate, but I had waited silently, collecting proof, strengthening my position, and now she was powerless. That night, I sat in the living room alone, letting the quiet wash over me. I felt the weight lift, felt the power return, not through anger, not through confrontation, but through calm, calculated patience. My son was safe. The truth was clear, and the woman who tried to destroy us had been exposed fully, finally. I poured myself a cup of tea, watching the stars outside, thinking about how silence, patience, and quiet strength could move mountains, even in a house full of lies. And for the first time in weeks, I smiled again, feeling the satisfaction of a plan perfectly executed. A storm arrived, but it was mine to command. The following morning, the house felt strangely quiet, almost expectant, like it was holding its breath for what was about to unfold. I moved through the rooms slowly, deliberately, my hands brushing over counters and railings I had touched 1,000 times before, remembering a life that had once been full of warmth and laughter. Emily was already awake, hovering near the kitchen doorway, her eyes darting to me with a nervous tension she could no longer hide. "Good morning, Mom," she said softly, her voice carefully controlled, polite, but there was a tremor in it, the tremor of someone who knew the rules of the game were changing. I smiled faintly, pouring my own coffee, inhaling the familiar aroma that had always comforted me in the mornings. "Good morning, Emily," I replied slowly, letting the words hang in the air, heavy with unspoken understanding. I watched her every move, the way her fingers fidgeted with the edge of a dish towel, the way her eyes flicked to the windows, as if searching for some kind of escape. My son David came down the stairs, still pale from the poisoning, but stronger than the day before. He looked between us, sensing something shifting, though he didn't know how much I already knew. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked quietly, concern laced with confusion. I nodded, my voice soft but steady. "I'm fine, David. Just thinking." The day stretched on slowly. Emily tried to pretend everything was normal, to smile, to ask questions, to distract us both, but I ignored her performances, focusing on my quiet work around the house. I organized paperwork, dusted shelves, folded laundry, every mundane task a shield, every movement a small demonstration of control. She kept glancing at the clock, checking her phone, whispering under her breath. I pretended not to notice, though every word, every pause, every nervous gesture was etched into my memory. That evening, after David had gone to his room to rest, Emily lingered in the living room, pretending to tidy up. I took a seat across from her, my cup of tea steaming between my hands. "Emily," I said softly, my eyes meeting hers, "do you really think I don't see everything?" Her hands froze mid-motion, her eyes widened, but she forced a laugh, delicate, fragile. "See everything? What do you mean?" she asked, voice high-pitched, brittle. I didn't answer immediately. I let a few seconds stretch into minutes, letting the weight of silence settle like a stone in the room. She swallowed hard, the color draining from her face. "Helen," she started stammering, trying to find her words. I shook my head slightly, calm, gentle. "No, Emily, you don't get to explain yet. Not until I choose." That quiet, patient tone, the one I had cultivated over weeks of planning, observing, waiting, was more terrifying to her than any shout or scream could ever be. She slumped slightly, realizing that her control was slipping, that the world she thought she had mastered was cracking beneath her. I continued, soft, slow, deliberate. You tried to harm my son. You tried to destroy my family. But I watched, I waited, and now you will see what happens when someone underestimated me. Her lips parted, her eyes blinking rapidly, her hands clenching into fists as panic crept in, like cold water, up her arms. You can't, she began, but I raised a single finger, silencing her without a word. That was the beauty of silence. It carried authority, power, and inevitability all at once. Later that night, I prepared my plan for the final step. Every detail had been recorded, every small movement she had made captured, every lie documented. I carefully printed copies of messages, emails, and photos. I organized them in a folder labeled clearly Emily's betrayal. I placed it where it would be impossible to miss, right in the living room, under the soft glow of the lamp. The next morning, I called David into the room. Sit, I said softly. He obeyed immediately, sensing the weight of the moment. I handed him the folder, and his eyes widened as he absorbed the truth, the deceit, the poison, the manipulation. Mom, all of this, he whispered, disbelief and anger mixing in his voice. I nodded, calm, letting the quiet fury in my chest radiate slowly through my expression. Yes, David, all of it. And now, you know the truth. Emily stood frozen nearby, her mouth opening and closing as if she were trying to find air, words, anything to defend herself. But the calm certainty in my demeanor, the slow, measured way I had revealed the evidence, rendered her powerless. She realized finally that the game was over and she had lost. She had thought herself clever, unstoppable, untouchable, but in her effort to destroy, she had underestimated the quiet strength of a mother who had watched, waited, and calculated every step. That afternoon, I went through the final legal procedures. Each signature, each document, each verified line ensured that Emily would never again be able to harm my son or manipulate our family. I did it quietly, calmly, without fanfare, without anger, the most powerful revenge being the one that is precise, controlled, and inevitable. By evening, Emily was pale, silent, her smile gone, replaced by something resembling fear. David thanked me quietly, wrapping an arm around me. Mom, I don't know how you stayed so strong, he murmured. I smiled softly, sipping my tea, letting him hold on to his newfound sense of security. Strength isn't loud, David. It's quiet, deliberate, and patient. And sometimes it's all about waiting for the right moment. That night, I sat alone in the living room, watching the stars through the window. A peace washed over me, deep and permanent, not through anger, not through chaos, but through patience, precision, and calm determination. Emily had been exposed. My son was safe, and the house finally felt like home again. And for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to breathe freely, knowing that justice had been served quietly, powerfully, and completely. The following morning, the house felt almost reverent, quiet in a way that made every creak and sigh of the floorboards noticeable. I moved through the kitchen slowly, carefully, setting out breakfast. Each movement deliberate, a quiet assertion of control. Emily hovered near the doorway, pretending to busy herself with the dishes, inside with the dishes, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers twitched whenever my eyes flicked in her direction. David sat at the table, still pale from the poisoning, but alert, aware now of the storm that had quietly passed over our lives and the one that was still gathering strength in silence. I poured my coffee slowly, inhaling the steam, letting it anchor me, reminding me that I was grounded, present, and in control. Mom, are you sure everything's okay? David asked, his voice cautious, searching for reassurance. I smiled softly, letting the warmth of it mask the fire that had been quietly building inside me for days. "I'm fine, David, just reflecting," I replied, my tone calm, deliberate, letting each word settle in the air like a measured heartbeat. Emily shifted uncomfortably, pretending to wipe down the counter, but the rhythm of her movements was jerky, unpracticed. I watched her silently, cataloging every gesture, every micro expression, every nervous glance. That afternoon, I excused myself to the study, closing the door behind me with a deliberate click. I spread out the evidence I had quietly collected, the leftover juice, photographs, receipts, messages, and little notes she had thought no one would see. Each item told a story, a narrative of deception, manipulation, and betrayal. I touched them lightly, letting my fingers trace the lines of deceit, feeling a calm satisfaction in knowing that the truth would no longer hide in the shadows. I called my lawyer, David's name on the line, a reminder of the life we were reclaiming. "Everything is in place," I said softly, a gentle calm in my voice, masking the fierce determination beneath. "Make sure the legal documents are finalized by tomorrow. I want her to see the consequences of her actions clearly, unmistakably." The lawyer paused, sensing the quiet authority in my tone, then confirmed, "Understood. Everything will be ready." I hung up and sat back, letting the silence envelop me. The house was quiet now, but I could feel the tension in the air. Emily's tension, her fear, her desperation, and it was intoxicating. A quiet validation of the patience and observation I had cultivated. Later, as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the living room, I found Emily standing near the windows, her hands pressed against the glass, staring outside as if searching for an escape. I walked up to her slowly, my movements unhurried, my presence calm but unmistakable. "Emily," I said softly, letting the single word hang in the air, weighted with meaning. She turned, her face pale, her lips parting, as though to speak, but no words came. I let a small, measured pause stretch between us, giving her the time to realize the depth of her position, the inevitability of what was coming. "Do you understand now?" I asked, quietly, letting the calm in my voice contrast with the storm that had been quietly building in my chest for days. She swallowed hard, blinking rapidly, the reality of her actions sinking in. Her eyes, once sharp and calculating, now held fear, not for herself, but for what she had done, and for the quiet power she could no longer control. "Helen, why you?" she stammered. But I shook my head slightly, letting her words fade into the air. There was no need for argument, no need for confrontation. The truth would speak for itself, and I would not raise my voice to do it. That evening, I moved through the house slowly, checking doors, reviewing notes, and preparing the final steps. Every detail had to be perfect. The timing, the presentation, the clarity of the evidence. I could hear Emily moving about, whispering under her breath, the soft sounds of nervous movements echoing through the walls. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat near the window, watching the sunlight fade, letting the quiet calm settle over me like a blanket. When David came into the room, his eyes met mine, and I saw in him the understanding that we were in control now, that the tide had turned, and that the house, our family, our lives were safe again. "Mom, you've been incredible," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. I nodded gently, sipping my tea, letting him feel the quiet power of patience, of preparation, and of a mother's love and protection. Later that night, Emily finally confronted the inevitable. She came to the study, her voice low, shaky. "Helen, what are you planning?" I looked up at her slowly, meeting her gaze, letting the calm in my eyes and the slow rhythm of my breathing convey a power that words could never fully capture. "Planning," I repeated softly, a hint of a smile on my lips. "No, Emily, I'm not planning. I'm acting quietly, deliberately, and when the moment is right, you will see the consequences of everything you've done." Her face went pale, the color draining, as the weight of her deeds settled heavily on her shoulders. I stood, moving past her with a soft, deliberate step, leaving her frozen in place. The house felt alive, charged with the quiet electricity of a storm about to break. And I, Helen, stood at its center, calm, measured, and ready. I had waited, I had watched, and now I was ready to reclaim what was mine. The night stretched on, the shadows deepening, and I felt the power of patience, the quiet intensity of calculated action, and the deep, resonant calm of a woman who knew her own strength. Emily could not escape the inevitability. David was safe. The house, our sanctuary, was secure. And for the first time in weeks, I let myself breathe fully, knowing that the final act, the quiet revenge, was imminent and it would be executed perfectly, silently, and irreversibly. The morning was quiet, almost eerily so. I moved through the house slowly, deliberately, savoring the calm that had been hard earned. Emily was in the kitchen, her movements tentative, careful, every gesture betraying the tension I had cultivated over the last few days. David was awake now, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee, his eyes clear, alert, and grateful. I poured myself tea, inhaling the warmth and letting the calm sink into my bones. Today would be the day that everything shifted permanently. I called Emily to the living room, letting the quiet authority in my voice fill the space before she even reached me. Emily, come sit, I said softly, and she obeyed, her steps hesitant, her face pale. I let the silence stretch between us, letting her feel the weight of what was coming, the inevitability of accountability. I brought out the evidence I had carefully gathered, notes, photographs, the leftover juice, the documents, and laid them out on the table in front of her. Her eyes widened as she recognized each item, the guilt and fear in her expression, finally honest, undeniable. This is everything, I said calmly, letting each word settle like a gentle hammer, soft but firm, precise. Every lie you told, every manipulation, every deceit, you left a trail, Emily, and I followed it quietly, carefully, until I understood it all. Her lips parted, trying to speak, but I held up my hand, letting her silence speak louder than words ever could. I didn't act in anger. I continued, my voice slow, deliberate, letting the emotional rhythm of calm fire carry the truth. I acted in certainty. I protected my family. I reclaimed what is ours. She shifted in her seat, swallowing hard, eyes darting, realizing the extent of her miscalculation. David came closer, standing behind her, a quiet presence of support and reassurance. I let him watch, letting the dynamic shift subtly, naturally, without force. The silence was heavy, but not cruel. It was just truth, undeniable and complete. I smiled softly, a human, calm smile, letting her see that the power wasn't in yelling or anger or vengeance. It was in patience, in careful observation, in quiet reclamation. You thought you could play with my family, with my life, I said gently, letting the rhythm of my voice rise and fall naturally. But you underestimated me. You underestimated what a mother will do to protect what she loves. I paused, letting her digest every syllable, every heartbeat of that moment. Emily finally looked down, unable to meet my eyes, her pride and composure eroded by the slow, steady inevitability of truth. Helen, she whispered, her voice trembling, weak, and raw. I shook my head slightly, letting the words hang in the air, unfinished. No explanation could repair the weight of what she had done that evening. After the confrontation, I moved through the house slowly, deliberately, checking the doors, reviewing my notes, reviewing my notes, preparing the final steps to ensure nothing could undo what I had quietly rebuilt. Every paper, every document, every account had been secured, returned to my name, to my control. The house, our sanctuary, was safe. I lit the fireplace in the living room, letting the warm light fill the space with comfort and reassurance. David sat nearby, silently acknowledging the strength and patience that had carried us through the storm. Emily remained distant, quiet, a living reminder of the reckoning that had unfolded. I poured myself tea and sat by the window, letting the cold wind outside contrast with the warmth inside, breathing deeply, slowly, letting the natural rhythm of calm and reflection settle into me. I thought about the months of deceit, the fear, the sleepless nights, the anxiety, and I felt a deep, satisfying peace. Revenge, I realized fully, was never about destruction. It was about reclaiming what is yours, asserting your truth, standing firm in your own power, and letting life show those who tried to hurt you that they cannot succeed against the quiet strength of a woman who knows her worth. The days that followed were gentle but deliberate. I began writing again, recording memories, reflections, and lessons learned. I planted a garden, a living testament to growth, patience, and quiet reclamation. I welcomed neighbors, friends, people who had no knowledge of the past, and in their company, I rediscovered trust, laughter, and calm. David and I shared moments of quiet conversation, rebuilding our connection, stronger and more honest than before. Emily remained at a distance, her presence a reminder of caution, but I no longer feared her. She had been seen, known, and her actions had been addressed. One evening, as the sun set, casting golden pink light over the trees, I sat on the porch, cup of tea in hand, reflecting. The warmth of the day faded slowly, replaced by the soft, calm glow of dusk. I whispered into the night a simple affirmation to myself. I am free. I am strong. I am whole. I had reclaimed my home, my family, my dignity. I had done so without shouting, without angered outbursts, without losing the calm I had cultivated. That was my power. And in that quiet strength, I found peace. Thank you, friends, for listening to my story. If you've ever felt betrayed or undermined by the people you love, remember patience and quiet strength can be the most powerful revenge of all. Like this video, if you felt the weight of betrayal, comment below where you're watching from and subscribe to Her Voice for more stories of courage, reclamation, and quiet power. Until next time, protect your heart, trust your instincts, and never underestimate the strength of a woman who has been pushed to the edge